Welcome, my friends. I'm Dave Champion. This is my co-host, Bill Carns. And together we are totally unprepared. Although not quite so much today.
Not entirely. We are in a little bit of a different setup here. We don't have our little bar top table, where, by the way, you owe me a shot of premium tequila this week.
Oh, I haven't even checked on that.
Because
here we go.
Ben Carson is still in the race. And you remember, now, here's the deal. We have a guest this week. That's why we have a different setup, guest. I'm going to allow an extra week just to ensure two things. A, Ben Carson is still in there, and B, this is really a premium tequila.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Good job.
So with that being said, let's cut straight into our guest. We have a fellow by the name of Randy Rose here, and Randy's here to discuss Congressional House Resolution 25. Randy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Basically, let me give you a rundown on exactly what H.R. 25 is. Now, to a liberal or a Democrat, a rank-and-file Democrat, this is why they like it. They get gross pay on their paycheck instead of net pay. They get $100 a month, free money from the federal government every single month. Consumer prices drop 12%. It fully funds Social Security forever, fully funds disability forever, fully funds Medicare forever, makes the economy go up over 8%, unemployment go below 4%, and everybody's wages goes up. They love it, the rank-and-file Democrats. Okay, now when I'm talking to a Republican or a conservative, this is how I present it to them. We are gonna get rid of the extortion from the federal government, get rid of the 16th Amendment, no more extortion. We're gonna replace that with an excise tax from Article 5 of the Constitution that allows us to charge an excise tax and get rid of the extortion of the 16th Amendment. Now, they like that idea too. But the bottom line is, we're getting rid of the 16th Amendment, so prices will drop some 35%. Now, the cynic is going to argue with that, but I'll get to that in just a minute. But we have to fund the government. So we fund it with a 23% retail sales tax. 1%, 2%, 3% of that covers Social Security, disability, and Medicare. Fully funded, that means your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will get it. Now, how in the world is the unemployment going to go down below 4% just because you do that? There is a ton of money overseas right now. All that money is going to come back to roost, as Reverend Wright says, and it's going to have to be invested, and all of it's not going to go in the stock market. All these for lease signs you see everywhere, they're going to no longer be. Everybody's going to be fully employed. If they want a job, they'll be able to get a job, and guess what? They're going to be calling you up, asking you if you will leave your job and come work for them for an additional so much money per year. And that is going to make the economy go through the roof.
All right. I have a couple of questions. First of all, I want to say as a blanket statement, that sounds quite utopian. And I am admittedly wary of anything that sounds utopian. Mm-hmm. There were you bandied about quite a few numbers of wonderful things that will occur, which, I mean, no offense to you, they're easy to say, they're easy to make a claim, and it's even easy to provide an argument for why these fantastic numbers would be true, as long as we don't have that legislation in place.
Okay. Let me explain what H.R. 25 is. It is the Fair Tax Act,
right,
not the flat tax.
Okay, but let me just recharacterize that to make sure our audience is with us. Okay. You use the phrase fair tax.
It's the fair tax,
right, okay,
not the flat tax.
Okay, we want to be very clear with our audience, not the flat tax. Clear enough for you?
Yes.
Okay, fair tax. Now, another way to characterize that, and if you disagree, let me know. Again, I want to make sure the audience is with us.
Okay.
A national retail sales tax.
Correct.
Okay, well, just want to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music. Now, you talked about the 16th Amendment going away.
Yes.
And you say we've got H.R. 25. Okay.
Right.
H.R. 25 is a piece of legislation. It cannot make it a constitutional amendment go away. So explain why, how this
Here's how it works.
Okay.
H.R. 25 is passed by the House of Representatives. S-155 in the Senate is passed. It goes to the president signs it. Then it goes to all 50 states. And we have to get at least 37, we'll probably get 40 or 40, probably more than 45 states that will ratify it. And once it's ratified, it becomes law. The 16th Amendment goes bye-bye.
Okay, so hang on, let me back up again. I'm trying to make sure the audience is clear on what you're describing. I hear you saying that H.R. 25 and the Senate, the handshake Senate bill,
Right.
is not merely legislation as we typically understand legislation. If I hear you correctly, what you're saying is, should both those measures pass and be signed by the president, that there's this statutory aspect to it where it would say, this and such shall be so, but there's also an if attached to that.
Yes.
Such and such will be true if the states ratify. And what would they be ratifying?
They'd be ratifying repeal of the 16th Amendment in essence.
Okay,
Now,
so they're not.
Would that be? Would it be replacing the 16th Amendment with another
With
amendment?
No. Well, obviously, when you repeal amendment, that is an amendment in and of itself.
I understand that,
Okay.
but would that repeal offer anything new, or is it a straight repeal?
Straight repeal.
Okay.
The new of it is a 23% retail sales tax.
Okay, that's the statutory part,
Right.
as opposed to the amendment part, correct?
Right.
Okay. I think I'm clear on the framework. Are you clear on the framework?
I am. My question is, who's sponsoring this?
It's bipartisan, Democrats and Republicans. The sponsors out of Georgia. I'll tell you what, if you really want to learn about all that stuff, go to fairtax.org, fairtax.org.
Hold on, we actually have a cell phone going. Good preparation. Totally prepared, Dave.
That's right.
Yeah, and definitely call Crescent Hardy. His phone number is going to be on the TV right now. And what you want to say is, co-sponsor HR 25, or I might not vote for you next November, and that'll get him off his, rump to do that.
Now let's talk a little bit about this. We're talking about a 23% sales tax.
Right.
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 And is that in the legislation, is this considered an excise tax, or is this considered a direct tax on sales of goods and services?
It's a direct tax on sales and services, but any sales tax is, in essence, an excise tax.
Okay, hang on a second, though.
We're paying 8.1% right now.
You just said it's both black and white simultaneously. That's an impossibility. The Constitution provides for what the Supreme Court has called the two great tax classes. Direct tax.
Article 5 in the Constitution.
Under the rule of apportionment.
Oh, okay.
And indirect tax under the rule of uniformity.
Okay.
You just said it's a direct tax and it's an indirect tax. There's no such thing as a tax.
It's a direct tax.
Okay.
Is your 8.1% sales tax a direct tax?
Okay. No, it's not.
Okay, then it's not.
Okay, and that's also a state, county, and local sales tax. It's not a federal sales tax.
But be that as it may, it will act the same way your 8.1% here does, 8.15 starting in January, thanks to the county commission.
Then now it's Clark County, not Nye County. Just so
I know. That's why I said here as opposed to Clark County.
No, I just want to go back. Not that it's particularly relevant, since in his opening he did refer to it as an excise. This isn't particularly relevant, but I do want to make sure the audience is with us. Anytime you're talking about national tax legislation, it must fit into the category of direct tax under the rule of apportionment, or it must fit into the category of indirect tax subject to the constitutional regulation of uniformity. That's built into the Constitution. Now,
it'll be the indirect one, because they will be able to raise it if they want to.
Those rules do not apply to the states, that indirect and direct tax with apportionment. These are very specific strictures for the federal tax framework, because the states had concerns about diminishment of wealth and so forth, which is why it's written the way it's written. So I just want to be clear. We're taking the direct tax subject to apportionment off the table. That's not what we're talking about. So what we're talking about is federal legislation that would enact a tax that falls within the class of indirect tax, which is imposed duties and excises as per the Constitution. And specifically, we know from both of your presentation that it's an excise, and we also know from state court rulings that have declared time and again that a sales tax is an excise tax. So we're talking about an excise. Now, I go through all of that dog and pony show because we've got people out there who are knowledgeable and understand the framework, and they're going to want to know exactly where everything sits correctly. And if we've got a saddle, we have to sit in the saddle correctly. Yes.
Okay.
So I want to make sure everybody understands.
I do want to bring up the cynic though, because I did mention that earlier.
Sure. Go ahead.
The cynic is going to say those evil companies, those evil corporations, those bad business owners, they're going to keep that tax on there on top of, and they're never going to lower their prices. But what I say to that is, what happened when mom and pop kept their prices high? Walmart moved in and lowered the prices. Where's mom and pop now? They're on the street. And that's what's going to happen if any of these evil corporations don't lower their prices by the 35% and then add the 23%. They're going to be on the street.
Well, history would certainly demonstrate that.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't.
History is our best predictor of the future. That is the best crystal globe. Yeah. Now, one of the things I wanted to bring up is just for a little bit of clarification for the audience, and this is something I learned from Dave years ago reading your book, is essentially a federal direct tax is limited to two things, and correct me if I'm wrong, slaves and real property. Now, we can eliminate slaves. That was taken care of with the 13th Amendment. And so it's now to real property, as I understand, is the only direct tax the federal government can levy.
But they're not going to do that.
No, and
no, I'm just talking for clarification, direct versus excise tax.
And virtually all of the founding fathers, when talking about the constitutional provision for direct tax, said it was highly unlikely that the federal government would ever levy a direct tax because of the, at least in that day, it would be easier today with computer power, but in that day it was considered a very onerous tax to enforce. They said only in the most extreme circumstances could one imagine that the federal government would levy a direct tax.
Understood. Right. Okay, so we've got a break coming up. When we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss some of the specific provisions of this, and quite honestly, the constitutional and legal authorities or boundaries involved in the fair tax. Good? Good enough?
Yeah, I'd like to also hit some of the, I think actually before we get into the constitutionality side of it, I'd like to, or before we explore that area, I'd like to look at some of the more practical, mundane, business, day-to-day type stuff.
Sure. Sounds good. Yeah. All right, so we'll pick this up. We're going to do away with the rants, and we'll pick this back up as soon as we come back.
Nobody told me I'm not going to rant.
We are rant-free today. We have a guest. We'll be back right after these words. Welcome back. Bill Carns, Dave Champion, and we are here together with our guest, Randy Rose. Not to be confused with Randy Rhoads,
who's dead.
The incredible guitar player who died in a plane crash, who was on the road with Ozzy Osbourne.
It's funny how those musicians keep dying in plane crashes. Huh?
You know what, though? This is a private plane crash where the pilot was hot dogging and actually clipped the tour bus.
Well, Leonard Skinner went down in a private one, too.
Yeah.
All right, I've got a couple questions, if you don't mind. Okay. I want to start with the practical business side of things, if you will.
And now somebody's calling me.
Oh.
Cell phone in the last segment wasn't enough?
I can't talk right now. Bye. Sorry.
Well, there you go. Easily handled. All right. All right, so one of the representations was that corporations would lower their prices to offset for the tax. I'm not sure I buy that, and let me share my logic with you on this. The price of goods sold in a store is not magical. In other words, we'll take Home Depot as an example, and we'll call it a sheet of
drywall.
No, it's something that people can relate to. Maybe a sheet of decorative stuff that you put in your house, like fake faux brick or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Okay, and what would the price of that be?
Well, let me go through my scenario, and then you can respond. Let's say that costs $29.
Okay.
Now, $29 is not a magical number that Home Depot pulls out of its sphincter.
No.
Okay. It's based on the cost of goods, transportation, the cost of operating the business called Home Depot, and so forth.
And taxes.
So let us say, for the sake of argument, that when all of that is put together, Home Depot's into that panel $25. Okay? That may not be wholly accurate. I'm using it for the sake of illustration.
There's no way they'd be for $25.
For sake of argument here.
Right. So they're making $4 per panel in my scenario.
Okay.
and I think the public has a perception that profits in these companies are oftentimes much greater than they are. For instance, if we take a look at a gallon of gasoline, okay, it cost us, $2 something at the pump, depending on what you're running.
3 something in Clark County.
Okay, 3 something in Clark County, and literally experts say that these guys are making 3, 4, 5 cents a gallon profit. So my point is that profits of major corporations per item is not always as high as the public imagines it is. So my point is, again, we'll just go with my scenario for right now. They're making $4 per panel. Okay. Now, if you used, I think in your example, 23% was the target?
23% retail sales tax.
Okay, so we add 23% on that. Okay, it would be impossible, given the example I provided, for Home Depot to reduce the price of goods 23% to offset that. Even if you disagree with my cost of goods versus profit scenario for Home Depot, you will have to admit there are companies that survive on that small level of profit. So how would they would be getting zero profit in order to compensate for 23% sales tax?
Thank you for the progressive point of view. That is exactly what the progressive
point of view.
No, that's the progressive point of view that wants to scare the public away from the Fair Tax Act. The fact of the matter is, and this is a fact because I am a manufacturer, I manufacture a board game, Big Sunday. You can see it at bigsunday.com. For every dollar that I want to earn, I must charge $1.55. For the distributor, every dollar he wants to earn, $1.55. Same thing with the wholesaler. And when it gets to the retail, that's why I said there's no way on Home Depot, they double it, okay? They double it on retail.
They double
it for their profit. Now here's what happens, okay? Now, the fair tax comes along, I only charge $1. I don't have to charge $1.55. And guess what? Neither does my distributor, neither does my wholesaler, and neither does the retailer, and therefore the price rolls back.
Tell us where the 55 cents is going.
Okay, if you just do the math, that's based on 35% income tax, okay? If you say $1, if I want to take home $1, what do I have to charge minus 35% and still come home, and it comes out to 1.01. And guess what? Every smart businessman, and I tell you there's smart businessmen at Home Depot, every smart businessman adds their taxes into their price. It's already there. If they were into that thing for, would you say $24? That would be because they've already added their income tax that they have to pay.
Yes, and I appreciate what you're saying. In your model at your business, those numbers make sense. Mm-hmm. Okay? When you talk about doubling the cost of goods on the retail side, which is what you said, if it costs them $1, they charge $2, was your, okay.
Yeah.
That's one
It's supposed to be a secret from the retail industry.
No,
Sorry if I let that out of the bag.
It's called keystoning, unless you're in jewelry, it's a triple keystone.
Right. And you can use the slur progressive. For most of my life, I've been a registered Republican.
Yeah,
okay? I'm hardly progressive.
No, I didn't say you were progressive. You gave us the progressive point of view, which is what you're supposed to do.
What I am is a business person. And I understand that for your model, it works. If you look at the larger the corporation, typically the smaller the percentile of profit they make, because they're looking at volume, not making the highest profit possible on every single item. So there are businesses that make much smaller margin than you're talking. Plus, if something costs me $10 and I double the price to $20, that $10 is only what it costs me to purchase the product. It has no bearing on the overall cost of me keeping my doors open and doing business with the public.
Right, all that's
that
added
adds on
into
top
the cost.
of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and the income tax. Now even you do it too, and you don't know you do. You don't do it consciously.
No.
But when you're thinking out of your profit margin, you know you have to pay income taxes on that. You know that. I know that. Well, and you have a take home you want to do.
Actually, no, I don't. But that's a separate.
You don't pay income tax?
No. Why would I?
Well,
it doesn't apply to me.
Income tax doesn't apply to you?
No, and it doesn't apply to you either. The only difference is I know it and you don't. But that's an issue for an entirely different
I think
show.
Wesley Snipes used that same argument.
But no, he didn't. And as a matter of fact, when I attempted to help his defense team, they said they wanted to go with the argument to put him in jail.
Oh, okay.
All right. So my point being that, and I'm not destroying the fair tax by claiming I question that premise. What I'm pointing out is I don't think what you characterized, I don't think it is a universal truth. I think companies will, of course, from their cost of their operating costs, they will deduct their income tax that they formerly would have to pay. And of course, when they pull that out and they put the 23% in, okay, I just don't.
You don't have the right to bring that up because of the fact you don't pay taxes. I'm talking about people that own businesses that do pay income tax.
What? Because I.
You don't have to add the income tax in your prices because you don't pay income tax.
But
we're talking about this universally.
Right.
We're talking about
universally,
not
99.9% of the people pay income tax.
I understand this. My point is, major corporations, I'm agreeing with you and you're arguing with me.
Okay.
Major corporations have income tax built into their raw numbers before they look at their profit.
You've heard EBITDA? Have you heard that before? EBITDA? Does that make sense? EBITDA?
I've never heard of EBITDA.
Okay,
No,
EBITDA
sorry.
is earnings before, before taxes.
What I would really love
is
to be able to
taxes
complete
in.
my statement.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm agreeing with you that corporations have their income tax included in their cost of doing business when they look at what they're going to sell it to the public.
Right.
I'm agreeing with you. Okay? I'm agreeing with you that if H.R. 25 and the Senate bill passed and the president signed it and the states ratified, I'm agreeing with you that businesses would pull that out of the equation. I'm agreeing with you. And instead of that now, there would be the 23% sales tax that would not be their price, that would be the government added at the cash register.
Right.
I'm agreeing with you on all of this.
Okay.
All I'm pointing out is to make a blanket statement that all companies are going to lower their prices to the fact that 23% is not felt, I don't believe is an accurate statement. Some will, some won't, depending on what their margins are. Okay, which to say that is not to say screw HR 25. It's to say let's not paint any universal truths that aren't universal truths to the audience. That's all I'm saying. Some companies will have the latitude to do what you're saying. Some companies will not have the latitude.
You're the first businessman I've ever met.
Well, I'm glad I'm sharper than the people you've been talking to.
Doesn't have to pay income tax. Every businessman I've met pays income tax.
I have a question for you on something here. Now, this 23% sales tax goes where? Does it go to the general fund?
To the U.S. Treasury.
U.S. Treasury. Okay, and what do they do with it?
They pay for our military. If you can go online and you can find a graph where all the money that comes into the government is spent in this way. They're going to do it's general fund. What do they do with the income tax? Same thing.
No, actually they don't.
Well, it goes into the Treasury and they spend the money on all the stuff that they need to spend.
In fact, it
money on.
doesn't. Have you heard of the Grace Commission and read the Grace Report?
I don't want to get off target.
No. This
I
is
don't
not
want to
off
get
target.
This
This is
here because there's.
Excuse me, Randy. You're on our show.
All right. Okay.
Let's
talk,
go
we'll
into
talk
this.
about what we feel is relevant.
The Grace Commission was very clear when President Reagan commissioned it in 1981 and said, I want to know where all of the money that the IRS collects goes. And what the Grace Commission boiled it down to was all of it goes to the Federal Reserve and it pays the interest on the national debt. None of it, not a dime, goes into the general fund. So where would this money go? Would it magically go into the general fund? We no longer pay back the national debt? Or does it go to pay the national debt?
Number one, the income that's going to come in is going to be a lot greater than the income tax that's coming in now. And the extra money, if we put in fiscally sound conservatives, they will pay off the national debt, which is going to be $20 trillion by the time Obama gets out of office. It's funny because when he got in office, it was $10 trillion, and Bush spent $3 trillion, and he's saying that's not patriotic. Then he gets in and spends $10 trillion, and you don't hear a peep. You know why? Because the progressives run our schools, they run our media, everywhere, and they're teaching our children progressive acts, and that's why when those kids come out of school, they register Democrat. But after 10, 15 years in the world, they switch and become Republicans.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that sentiment that in formal school, you learn one thing different than the school of hard knocks once you get out and generally wake up. But I'm still a little concerned about how we end up with this, because the way the financial system is set up now, with the Federal Reserve and all the laws that handle the production of our money, that the IRS is solely responsible for paying the national debt back for what they collect. Would the IRS still be in existence?
No.
If I may, Bill, let me intercede.
There'll be no more IRS.
I think if all the income taxes collected have always in our lifetime, gone to pay the interest on the national debt, and as the Grace Commission report said, not for any of the services that taxpayers would imagine is when they pay their taxes that they're going to get. There would seem to be no way that this is still a form of income tax, even if the IRS were to go away. It's a replacement for our current income tax, yes?
Is 8.1% sales tax and everything you pay income tax? If it is, then it is.
Well, that's a different question. That's a state tax or a county tax, not a federal tax.
It's the same thing. It's a sales tax.
Yes, but we're talking about what it's going to pay for, not what we call it.
So let's get to what it'll pay for and what we're going to call it after the break. Dave Champion, back
All right,
to
there we
you.
go. All right. We were having a discussion. I think what I would want to use here is the language of the Supreme Court to clarify my question. They said it is incumbent upon us to look beyond the form of a thing to its substance. Okay? So I don't really care what we call it. You can call it HR 25, we can call it fair tax, we can call it national retail sales tax, we can call it. The question that Bill posed and what I was following up on, and I was in a sense trying to answer it for you, apologies. And if you disagree with what I'm saying, by all means, when I'm done, chime in and tell me, Dave, you're mistaken.
Okay.
If it is a substitute, we're taking the income tax as we know it off the table. We're taking the fair tax, the national retail sales tax, putting it there in its stead.
That's correct.
Okay. So then I see no way with the United States being apparently feeling it is obligated to pay the interest on the national debt, which has always been with the income tax. Whatever would replace the income tax, I cannot possibly see how it could service anything other than the same purpose.
Okay.
Somebody would have to explain to me how we're no longer going to service the national debt.
And that's where my big question is, because one of the things that is not necessarily common knowledge is Woodrow Wilson borrowed $80 million to fight World War I. Ever since then, we still owe that $80 million, but we've been paying the interest on that for 100 years now.
Yep.
Because the way the system is set up, we can't actually pay any principal on the debt. Once we borrow money, that money never gets repaid. We just pay interest on it. And that's the way that the laws are set up to support this financial quagmire, if you will.
Okay. Now, let me bring up the issue of VAT. Obviously, people who look outside the United States at places like Europe or have heard of the VAT value-added tax. And in Europe, depending on who you talk to, it's either been a smashing success or it's been horrid. And one of the things that I noticed when I researched VAT several years ago is that it has been raised again and every time a legislator says, we need more money, the first thing they do is say, up the VAT rate.
Yep.
Now, I understand from our previous discussion that you wanted to assure the audience this is not a VAT.
It is not a VAT tax.
Okay.
No, a VAT tax is basically a tax that the manufacturer pays, that the distributor pays, that the wholesaler pays, and the retailer pays. Oh, wait a minute. We do have a VAT tax. It's called the income tax. Yeah. Because guess what? The income tax is on each of those levels.
Or phrased another way, the VAT...
Well, let me finish.
I just want to make sure the audience understands. The VAT tax, a tax is paid on every step in the production,
right,
all the way to the consumer.
Right, that's value-added tax.
Make sure they understand what we're talking about.
And that's really what we have now when you got income tax added instead of a value-added tax. You take all that away and you just have a one-time retail sales tax. This is not a VAT tax. The progressives are trying to tell everybody it's a VAT tax because you have to understand the 16th Amendment is the cornerstone of the progressive movement. That's why they're against this so much. But the rank and file Democrats are not necessarily progressives. They're just regular people and they're paying taxes and they love the Fair Tax Act. But their leaders don't. Like Harry Reid, no way. Are you kidding? Take away the cornerstone of the progressive movement? Okay. Never going to happen.
If I may.
In his opinion.
If I may, and I don't want to attempt to constrict your pitch. I find it absurd to consider that the income tax in the 16th Amendment is a progressive issue. Neocons that want to practice imperialism all over the world and have the largest military known to man and go out and murder millions of people worldwide to take control, they want the income tax too to fund their shit, okay? And that's hard right stuff, not hard left stuff.
Unless the the sales tax is going to be 3 times more.
My
And then they
point-
got 3 times more money. Why would they want to stick with the income tax?
My point
and
is
take one-third
the
the money?
people on the right who want to pursue things, I've used worldwide domination as just one example. The people on the right who want to pursue extremely high ticket things that they feel are important, they're every bit as passionate about keeping the income tax as the people on the left who want to fund domestic programs.
But those guys that want to keep the income tax, anybody that wants to keep the income tax is a progressive.
Okay,
That's
now
the
you
litmus
understand.
test.
Now you understand.
That is the litmus
Dick
test.
Cheney, according to him, is a progressive. Okay.
He is.
All right.
And so was George W. Bush.
You know
and
what?
so was his father.
You won't necessarily get an argument from me, but I'm glad they now understand where
telling
you're
the
coming
truth.
from.
Nor I.
Yes.
Nor I.
Yes.
Now there is one candidate, actually maybe 2.
Oh, let's not. No, let's not. No,
Yeah, let's
not get into
it.
We're not going to get into the presidential race. Let's not get
right.
sidetracked. What are we here for? HR 25.
Okay,
Right.
so I have a question for you here. We're talking about doing away with the income tax and all the progressive ways that through all the steps, everybody's paying income tax, from the manufacturer to the
Right.
distributor to the wholesaler to the retailer, and then the individual. So we get rid of all that. We have a one-time tax at the end of 23%.
Right.
Okay, now is this
Retail.
on all goods, all services, internet sales? Is this everything? What is this all on?
That was
Am I
great.
gonna-
He started nodding. You go
Because
internet sales, and the
I-
head
Oh, wait,
bobbing
I
stopped.
No, not
The
that.
reason I ask is,
Anything that's being done now will continue, yes.
okay, because my question is, if I go to Amazon and I order a book for $10, it's now going to be $10 plus 23% will be $12.30, and if shipping's $5, it's then going to be an extra $1.15 to ship it. Is that what I'm looking at?
From what I understand, no, they're not going to do on the internet. It's going to be just the brick and mortar the way it is now.
Okay, and who's able
But
to
who's to say they don't
raise the
change it?
rates?
They can change it, but this act does not call what this act does do though is it bars the lawmakers from borrowing from the fund or spending the fund, which is what they've done right now. If you go and say, "Hey, where's the Social Security fund right now?" they'll open a drawer and they'll give you a bunch of IOUs.
Okay. Now, if I may, let's get back to VAT for a minute.
Okay.
It's not a VAT. Okay.
Not a VAT.
I got your back on that. Okay. But there's a parallel though in this, and I think you'll agree with me. We just talked about, and you were nodding your head when I said it, that in Europe the solution to every lack of money has been raise the VAT, increase the rate of the VAT.
That's what they've been doing, not the solution. You said that's what they've been doing. Yes, that's not the solution.
That's
though.
their offered solution. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm with you. I don't consider it a real solution. Pretty much the opposite of a solution,
Exactly.
right? Take money out of the economy. Yo, okay.
That's a solution.
Yeah, how is that a solution? Yeah, take it out of the productive part so that the unproductive part can use it.
Right.
All right, so with that said, with that example in mind, is there anything in H.R. 25 or the Senate bill or the constitutional amendment that would bar Congress from every time they feel they need more money raising the percentile rate on this fair tax?
Nothing to bar them from raising the sales tax, but here's the good news. There's no sales tax, there's no federal sales tax on used goods. So, if all of a sudden they decide they want to raise it up to 40%, buy a used car. And then they're going to bring it back down again because they know that everybody will go to the used market and they won't be paying
Well,
anything.
I'm a little confused because when you go to the secondhand store, you pay tax.
But not federal sales tax. That
Okay.
will not be there.
Now,
The 8.1%
it
will be
not
there.
be there because
Because this particular act bars it from doing it for stuff like that. Now,
until they amend it later.
That's my thing. What
Well,
if, when they pass a new law?
I'm not trying to beat this
who
tax.
knows what's going to happen in the future? I'm not going to sit here and say, well, maybe they're going to do this. Maybe they will raise it. I don't know, but guess what? I didn't want Clark County to raise it, and they did.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and by the way, I want you to know I'm not beating up HR 25.
Oh, I know.
What I'm doing is you're pitching its strengths, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's apparent to the people who are watching. And I am probing for potential weaknesses
Right.
for their benefit. Okay. So I'm not attacking HR 25.
I know.
Okay. I want people to come away.
But I'm very passionate about it.
I understand you are.
It's the best thing for our country.
You are pitching all of the positives, correct?
Well, the only true negative involved in this is it takes power away from the lawmakers, and that's why it's hard to get done.
Well-
See, as a lawmaker, that's why the Harry Reids and even our own Crescent Hardy I don't know if this is the reason, but they want to keep the income tax to use it against people. Power, okay, over you. Now, When you take income tax away, they've lost their power. That's the downside as far as if there's a downside to the Fair Tax Act.
Okay. Bill, you have anything?
I do. I have a question on it sounds as though what you're pitching here with this is that as it's designed right now, HR 25 and the 125, I think you said in the Senate.
That's 155.
155 in the Senate. That as that stands, it's great. But there's no provisions that prevent Congress from in the future changing, amending. So it's great now, but there's nothing to stop Congress from any time in the future, be it 3 months or 3 decades, from changing it.
There's nothing to stop Congress right now for charging you 80% or 90% of your paycheck. Not a thing. They can do it. The 16th Amendment gives them the right. It gives them the right to take 100% of your money. That's not your money.
Right. The power to tax is the power to destroy. We understand that. So who was actually behind writing this fair tax? Who's behind the idea here? Who's putting this together?
Most of these things have some guy who, he's the guy. Like Ron Paul was the guy for the whole liberty movement. Is So who's the guy? If there is
what's the nucleus?
You told me not to say his name, but I'll say it.
No, I just don't want to pitch anybody for president.
It's Mike Huckabee.
Oh,
Mike Huckabee conceived the fair tax.
He's part of the conceiving of this Fair Tax Act.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Congressman Lindsey from Georgia. You can get all this information by going to fairtax.org.
Okay. Now, let me just ask you a question for clarity's sake. Huckabee and Graham are the
two opposites.
Explain.
Graham's a progressive. Huckabee's a conservative.
Okay. But didn't I hear you say they both support it?
No, Graham does not support it.
Does not support it, okay.
No.
So I've been hearing about the fair tax for a very long time.
20 years.
Much longer than Huckabee has been politically known.
Who invented it, I don't know. But
okay.
I do know that economists have looked at it for 20 years, and economists are giving it thumbs up. The reason that it's not happening is because our lawmakers don't want to give up their power to the people. This gives all the power to the people.
Does the federal government have?
If they can raise the rate, how is it? I'm lost on how that disempowers the politicians.
Just because you raise the rate doesn't mean it's going to stick. Because the people are going to say, "Hey, you're fired. I'm putting in this guy over here who's not going to raise the rate."
Does the federal government have the constitutional authority to levy a national sales tax?
Not without. Well, yeah, actually, they could do it right now. Yes, they could. But then you'd still have the income tax. We don't want a sales tax and an income tax here. One or the other. We want to get rid of the income tax because it's extortion. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you a story about Mary Lou.
There's
if there's another segment.
There is. And I have some questions when we come back, perhaps before the Mary Lou story, about the idea that because something exists today and has been accepted by people who don't understand the truth, that we can imagine that we can do the same, we can bamboozle people the same way tomorrow, and that they won't suddenly wake up because the bamboozling is so much more irksome tomorrow than it was today. So when we get back from the break, I'll ask that. I know, cryptic. You'll find out.
I also want to clear up something about the Social Security, but we'll do that when we come back.
Okay.
Welcome back. Fourth and final segment. Our guest, Randy Rhodes. And Dave, you had something you wanted to hit?
Yes. I'm going to take my cryptic thing I offered right at the end and put it in more understandable terms. To refresh the audience, of course, I have written this book, Income Tax Shattering the Myths. The website is there on the screen. You can go to the website and www.incometaxtruth.com. And this is 17 years worth of research, but it doesn't deal with just the income tax, although about 90% of it is the income tax. It also deals with things like sales tax. And so I want to lay down a premise, and then I would like Randy to speak to the premise. So bear with me a moment as I lay down the premise.
Okay.
The United States Supreme Court has said that as Americans, we have an unalienable right to acquire, possess, utilize, and dispose of property. That's a constitutional right. Mm-hmm. So in the scenario, I want to sell this mug. Okay, I own this mug. This is my mug. There are many like them.
This mug is mine.
Okay, and according to the United States Supreme Court, it is a constitutional right that I have it, and I have a constitutional right to dispose of it.
Yes.
So I say to Bill, I would like to sell you this mug for $3. Bill has a constitutional right to acquire property. And of course, we know that the Supreme Court has said that the power to tax is the power to destroy, which is why in this country we do not tax constitutional rights. The only sole exception since time immemorial in this country has been property taxes. We do not burden rights with taxes. So I sell this mug to Bill. He agrees it's worth $3 to him. He buys it for $3. One of the things that I point out in my book is that the sales tax, as it is understood by the public, has nothing to do with how it's understood by the public. Because to put a sales tax in between this transaction is to burden our, let me finish, is to burden our constitutional right. My right to sell, his right to buy is burdened by a government tax on that. Now, I used to live in California, and the California statute is very, very clear. It says there is hereby sales tax. There is hereby imposed upon the privilege of selling at retail, blah, 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 blah. So I wrote to about a dozen of my elected officials and appointed officials, the governor, my personal representatives, the head of the Franchise Tax Board, the State Board of Equalization, which has authority over sales tax, and so on. And I gave a scenario very similar to what I just said with Bill. And I said, can you explain to me what the privilege is that I'm exercising, because a privilege and a right are exclusive, okay? If I'm exercising a right to sell and he's exercising a right to buy, there's no privilege there, and an excise tax, according to the courts, is a privilege tax. So how do we get an excise tax in the middle of what is a constitutional right? I got back 3 letters which were boilerplate that never answered my question, and the rest of them never responded at all. So it appears that at least the entire state of California could not answer that very simple question. So when we come back around to your situation with H.R. 25, where is the privilege?
Well, your premise is entirely wrong, because if you own that, it's used, and you sell it to him, there is no national sales tax on it. So your whole kit and caboodle is shot down the tubes.
But we discussed a moment ago that Congress could simply amend that to include used goods. But if I'm selling new goods, I have the right to...
The Act specifically says they can't do that.
Let's go back.
Okay.
Let's say I own a widget store.
Okay.
Okay. I go to my supplier and I say, I need 150 widgets in blue.
Right.
Okay. I have a constitutional right to acquire and possess property.
Yes.
Okay. There's no tax involved in that. Give me that.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
My customer comes in and wanders around. I have a store filled with retail sales racks.
Right.
With widgets in blue and purple and green of all various sizes. And they come up to the register and say, we like these 2 widgets.
Right.
Those widgets still belong to me. It's still a constitutional right for me to dispose of them. They have a constitutional right to acquire them. We're both exercising rights. Where is the privilege because according to the federal courts, an excise tax is a tax upon the exercise of a privilege. Since I as the seller and the other person as the buyer are both engaged in a unalienable right, which cannot be burdened by tax, where is the privilege?
Well, the only time it works is because of the fact that you're registered with the federal government as a tax collector, and you're going to collect 23% on that mug. Okay,
so this is good. I like this answer.
It's the truth.
Well, let me explain why that's both good and bad. Okay. You saw that meme that was posted earlier today, the one about the W-4.
Yes.
Okay. The income tax is often referred to as a system of self-confession. We've probably all heard that. Okay. And a lot of people misconstrue that the self-confession is on a 1040. It's really not. The self-confession takes place on a W-9 or a W-4, and there's nothing barring somebody from falsely self-confessing.
Right.
Out of ignorance. Okay. So I'd like to see that problem with the existing income tax cleared up, that people who are not required to fill out a W-4 or not required to execute a W-9 are no longer bludgeoned and extorted out of their unalienable rights. If so, the current income tax you wouldn't need H.R. 25, because the current income tax would probably apply to about 3% of Americans if Americans knew the truth about the income tax. But my point is that when we talked about a retail sales tax, and what he just said was they would register to collect the tax. Well, that's the same thing as filling out a W-9 or filling out a W-4. So that would tell me that the government would have to impose some trickery upon the American people to hoodwink them into registering, just like they hoodwink people into filling out the W-9s and W-4s
They
today.
use the business permit to do that. If you have a business permit, then then the Board of Equalization is going to come at you, and then for the national sales tax, the U.S. Treasury is going to come to you.
Okay, so in the national legislation, the HR 25, is there text in there that says anyone within the states of the union who has a business license shall pay this?
No.
Okay.
It's the nice thing is it's only 10 pages. Anybody can read it. You can go to house.gov, put in HR 25, you can go to fairtax.org and read it. It's 10 pages, that's it. The same exact 10 pages is in the Senate. It hasn't come out of Ways and Means. It hasn't been voted on because the fact that the progressives have been in charge for so long, it would fail. But now the conservatives are moving in.
You had something
we got
you were
a
waiting
chance.
on. So.
Yeah, just to clear something up, you had mentioned something earlier about funds, trust funds, if you will, and going in there like Social Security and there's nothing but IOUs.
Right.
When in fact, we used to have a Social Security trust fund until the 1960s when Congress just did away with that, and now it's provided by the annual budget and general fund. So although we get the status of the Social Security trust fund on an annual basis, we know that it's completely false. As a matter of fact, they came about 6 years ago and admitted it's false.
Yeah.
It's proverbial.
And if I could throw this out for clarification and really irritate the audience, Social Security is now funded each year no differently than welfare is.
That's true.
Exactly. It is a line item.
That's true.
Yeah.
So
Doesn't mean people won't be mad to hear it, but it's true. Yeah.
is this fair tax intended to go into a fund or just into the general fund and spent?
3% of it goes into 3 different funds. One for Social Security, one for disability, and one for Medicare.
You said 3%. I think you mean
Of the
in-thirds.
23%,
Okay.
3% covers those things. The other
Okay.
20% goes into the general fund.
Okay.
So my next question, are you done with your?
Well, what I'm going to get to there is if we didn't have a national debt, we didn't have to pay the interest, we didn't have to pay the 18, 19, 20 trillion dollars on that, then this sounds like it would be a reasonable way to fund the government. However, with us still needing to fund the government, which the only reason we're funding is because it's too big, they are not allowing private industry to take over, and they are growing exponentially. How would we fund that and pay off the national debt?
Can I respond rather than Randy? Because I think I can do us all justice.
Okay.
Okay. Substituting HR 25 for the current income tax is like, the current income tax is like being raped. HR 25 is like being raped with lube. I mean, it's not going to change what's happening to the American people or how our government is structured or paying the interest on the national debt. It makes, potentially the argument could be made that it makes being raped a more pleasurable experience.
No, you're choosing to be raped.
Or a less onerous
You're
experience.
choosing to be raped because you could buy, but if you don't want to get raped, buy used. And you know what? 90% of the poor people buy used products. They don't buy new products. They go to the thrift stores and stuff like that.
Well, then why not do away with 90% of the income tax?
Hey, I got no problem. But, I say get rid of. I want to get rid of the 16th Amendment because that's extortion. Let me tell you about Mary Lou real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
She always wanted to have a dress shop in Manhattan. That was her dream growing up as a child. She finally got the dress shop in Manhattan. This guy comes in, he looks like an Italian, he looks like he's got a broken nose, remnants thereof, and he says, you're gonna give me 35% of everything you earn here. And he walked out and she just freaked, so she called the police, and the police said, ma'am, that's extortion. You gotta call the FBI. So she called the FBI, and the FBI said, yes, ma'am, that's extortion. Did you get a description? Did you get his license plate? She said, he left his business card. What does it say? IRS.
Yeah.
See, when the government does it, oh, it's patriotic. When the mafia does it, it's a crime.
Yeah.
Well, if you actually look deep enough in this book, you'll find out that when the government does it, it is a crime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, want to ask you we have a different opinion of the wisdom of this. Not that I oppose it. I just would like to see the whole income tax thing set within constitutional bounds, and I don't see the current one or that one as justifiable within the Constitution. So says the courts, and so I don't see it. It's, as I said, substitute getting raped without lube for getting raped with lube, in my view.
Well, there's an economic graph that shows that when the price goes up, demand goes down.
I'm sure there's one for just the opposite.
And when you raise the sales tax, less money comes in.
But let me, I want to get to the political part.
Okay.
You hinted at this a little bit earlier, that the politicians don't want this for the reasons you stated.
Right.
And you also stated this concept has been around for 2 decades now,
Right.
roughly. Okay. So if it's been around for 2 decades, and the politicians, it's no bueno in their eyes for the reasons you stated, and I don't mean to be offensive when I phrase it this way, but it would strike me 2 decades into it, the politicians don't like it. It sounds to me kind of like it's DOA.
Well, it's up to you. It's up to the people. It's not up to the elected officials. You have to vote for the people that are going to, A, co-sponsor the Fair Tax Act, and you got to vote for the president that's going to sign it. And if you don't, then you're voting against your own self-interests.
Okay.
Which goes to the other meme you saw today about, no wonder we're run by an oligarchy, right?
Randy, we want to thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Folks, you can always go online and check us out. Send us your emails. You can send us your emails to daveandbillshow@gmail.com, right across the bottom of the screen here. As well, you can also always check us out online. You can see the videos, the replays of this show, the audio at totallyunprepared.info. We've got our Facebook page. Send us the emails. Check those things out. Comment on Facebook. Send us the things that you want us to talk about, and Dave and I will decide whether or not we should talk about what you want us to talk about.
You're so good administratively, Bill.
With that being said, thank you very much. We'll be back next week.